afternoon, everyone. This is going to be a very brief workshop to introduce you to SIFT, which are the 4 moves that you can use to fact check information that you encounter on the internet. SIFT can also be quite useful when it comes to verifying things on social media. So it's not just for academic purposes, it's for just about anything that you might encounter or come across. Today, we are going to discuss some of the moves, and then we're going to be doing some live demonstrations on how you can utilize the SIFT moves in progress. So the moves. So SIFT are 4 fact-checking strategies that can help you quickly decide whether or not a source is worthy of your attention. It is not something that you utilize to, fact-check every little bit of information. It's something that you can utilize to quickly ascertain whether or not a source is even worth reading. A lot of the times we end up in these situations where we encounter things on social media, and we may think that we need to engage with that information when the reality is, if you use these moves, you can quickly ascertain if you should even bother reading, let alone engaging with that information. And the less we engage with unsubstantiated, unverified information, the better off our online or our mental hygiene will be, specifically when you're not wasting your time going back and forth with people on the internet, particularly with social media. So the 4 moves are stop, investigate the source, find better coverage, and then tracing the claim to its original context. What you want to know about these moves is that they are not necessarily things that have to be done in that order. These are 4 moves, meaning you can go with whichever one is suitable for that moment. Sometimes stop, the first move, is all you need, especially if you're encountering something on the internet that is eliciting an emotional response from you, something that's making you angry. The first move is all you need to just say, stop. I don't really know the source of this. I'm not really familiar with this person or the organization posting this claim. And then from there, you can decide what other moves you want to use. Do you want to investigate better? Do you want to maybe go to a different source and see if this is substantiated? Or maybe you want to do a little bit of digging on your own. Either way, the moves are there as a toolkit. So you decide which one of the tools you want to use at which appropriate moment. So why do we need SIFT, right? On the internet, you're going to encounter quite a variety of information. The more, I guess, dangerous forms of information are going to be misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. And so misinformation and malinformation kind of intersect in the segment of disinformation. So when someone is posting something online that is misinformation, they're unintentionally making a mistake. They're posting something that's inaccurate, such as dates, statistics, captions, that kind of things. That's usually an honest, unintentional mistake. So that's usually misinformation when someone doesn't take the time to corroborate that info before posting it. Then you have malinformation on the other end of the spectrum, and that is when a publication or an individual deliberately posts information that is known to be incorrect and is known to be, something that will elicit a negative or an irrational emotion from you, right? So that is the difference, is that one is unintentional, one is very much intentional. And then there's disinformation, which is kind of in between, right? These are things that are deliberately manipulated audio, photoshopped visuals, conspiracy theories that are based on not actual factual information. So that's at the intersection of misinformation and malinformation is disinformation. And disinformation is probably what you're more likely going to encounter in your everyday use of the internet. So why should we fact check information? It's a form of information hygiene. So when you take the time to fact check something, you are minimizing your own, you're minimizing the possibility that you will likely fall for misinformation or disinformation. So when you are taking the time to use these SIFT moves, you are essentially preventing the spread of misinformation, right? So it's really important to remember that. That's why we have stop at the beginning, because sometimes just stopping will be enough to kind of help to prevent the spread of this. A lot of the times when you do encounter information on the internet, it's probably third or fourth hand information that has been circulated through many different other social medias, and you don't really know where it originated from. So fact checking is probably one of the most important things, tools that you can have in your repertoire, so that you are not falling for a lot of these falsified types of information that you will encounter on the internet. So we talked about the 4 moves. One of the first moves is stop. So when you initially encounter information, you should stop and ask yourself, do you know or trust the author or the publisher or this website? There's so many different varieties of websites out there on the internet. And so it is very likely that you will encounter information from a source that you are not familiar with. And that's when stopping comes in handy, because you really do have to take that moment to ascertain, do I know where this information is coming from? Even if you know the individual posting it, you're asking yourself, do I know whether or not they got their information from somewhere factual? Like, is this someone I know that is punctual about substantiating claims, right? So stopping is the first thing. You don't want to share anything that you're unable to verify on your own. So unless you are able to verify that it is reliable or can be substantiated by other sources, you don't want to share that at all. And a lot of misinformation on the internet can be avoided just by simply using the first move, stopping, asking yourself, do I know these people who are publishing this info? Am I familiar with this organization? No? Okay, so I won't share this until I know more about what is being said and what is being posted. So very important thing there. Oh, and thank you for that, Christelle. For those of you who are participating, can you please go ahead and put your student ID numbers in the chat, please, so that we can document who has attended. Edwin will go ahead and grab those from the chat. So I do apologize for missing that cue, but thank you so much, Christelle. So the next step in the SIFT moves, once again, these moves are not necessarily things that you have to follow in order. So when I'm saying number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, I'm just kind of listing them in that order because of, my own preference. It doesn't have to be in that order. So the next idea would be to investigate the source. Once we stop and realize that we are not familiar with the organization or the individual posting the information, then you have to go ahead and investigate a little bit more. So investigating the source usually has to do with, finding out the expertise or the agenda of the person who created this information, right? So fact checkers, which you will be at the end of this, are usually people who read laterally, meaning they don't necessarily dig deep into one single source. They will see a piece of information, they will stop and recognize that they're unfamiliar with this information. It doesn't really, tick any boxes for them. And they'll say, you know what? I actually need to go ahead and read across the internet to see if I can find other verified sources that are substantiating this information. So reading laterally means that you are hopping out of that website or hopping out of that social media post immediately before you even, dig any deeper. And you are essentially going to other trusted sources to verify and corroborate. This is something that people aren't used to doing because you see something sensational and you want to go ahead and dig a little bit deeper into it. But if it's a source that you are not familiar with, then the next step would be to go and find the information in other verified sources. As you become a more experienced fact checker, you will have your own repertoire or your own list of reputable sources that you depend on, because they are the ones who do the work of verifying information. And so this will come easier and easier to you as you encounter more and more sources of information. And I just want to make sure that I remind everyone here, if you are an MDC student, please go ahead and put your student ID number in the chat for us so that we can document your participation in this workshop. Okay, so one of the quickest ways that I can usually investigate an organization is by using Wikipedia. Wikipedia has a very contentious reputation in academia. It is technically a source that quote unquote anyone can edit. However, Wikipedia pages go through a very rigorous vetting process in which, you know, a lot of the information that you will see has to have a source that is corroborating that information as well, right? So when you do use Wikipedia, the only, I guess, hint or tip that I have is that you want to avoid Wikipedia articles that are labeled as stubs. These are usually articles that have too little information to be substantiated. However, there are many Wikipedia articles that are fully fleshed out that are going to be great resources to use, right? So if what I usually teach my students is, it's called the just add Wikipedia trick, right? So just add Wikipedia at the end of your search terms, and it will pull up the Wikipedia page for that organization, which is a very quick way of ascertaining whether or not an organization or a website is worth your attention. I have an example here. So you have the American Academy of Pediatrics versus the American College of Pediatrics. These both appear to be very straightforward organizations in terms of their reputation. But if you were to use my just add Wikipedia trick, you would actually see that these are very different organizations, right? So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to open up a new tab and drag it over here. And we're going to use the just add Wikipedia trick, right? So if we were to utilize this trick here, the American Academy of Pediatrics is what we're searching for. So American Academy of Pediatrics, and I'm going to put Wikipedia at the end. And so the American Academy of Pediatrics, what I'm trying to do, remember, is I'm investigating the source to verify who is this organization, especially if I'm encountering medical advice or medical information from them. So the American Academy of Pediatrics is the largest professional association of pediatricians in the United States, headquartered in DuPage County, Illinois, maintains an office in DC. It's published hundreds of policy statements ranging from advocacy issues to practice recommendations, right? So I have a little bit of background and all that other good stuff here. Now, by comparison, the other organization was the American College of Pediatrics. So let's do that comparison. Okay, so American College of Pediatrics is a socially conservative advocacy group of pediatricians and other healthcare professionals in the United States. The group's primary focus is advocating against abortion rights and against rights of gay, queer, and trans people. ACPEDs promotes conversion therapy and purity culture. As of 2022, its membership has been reported to be about 700 physicians. And each of these claims are substantiated by these are not footnotes. I believe these are endnotes, whichever ones appear in the top right. Usually footnotes are bottom right, but these are essentially links to the sources where the Wikipedia authors have corroborated the information that they are putting here. So if you wanted to, you know, trace where they got this information from, you can go to those sources there. Who here is surprised by the difference in motives and in just general agenda between the two organizations that seem to have fairly the same name? I would honestly get American Academy of Pediatrics mixed up with the American College of Pediatricians quite often because they seem to be the same type of organization. Is anyone here surprised that these are organizations that have very different goals?
That's scary.
It is a little frightening, especially if you don't do that digging, right? So if you do encounter some information online, it is important Yes, Jessica, you would think that they would be the same or at least have the same motives. So that's just one of the tricks that you can use when it comes to investigating a source, you know, so you would stop and ask yourself, am I familiar with any of these organizations? Granted, I was not familiar with either of these organizations before I began teaching these SIFT workshops, right? And so sometimes you might feel a little shocked by what you find when you just take, you know, a couple of seconds like what we just did, and we just investigated the source fairly quickly. That was a very quick demonstration of how you can use Wikipedia for good, I suppose. So another strategy to investigating sources, a lot of people are familiar with this chart, this media bias chart. I like this organization, All Sides Media Bias, because they have a lot of different tools that you can utilize in order to kind of see where the media outlets stand in terms of their you know, verified biases. All Sides does a really good job of breaking down and justifying why they place each of these organizations in the particular area or in the order that they do. And so that's going to be a really good resource to use. I'm going to put the link for these tools in the chat right now so that you have access to it. And then I am going to pull it up here for our presentation. So this is the media bias toolkit from All Sides. What you're looking at on the PowerPoint is the media bias chart. They even have a fact-checking bias chart, right? So if you are using a fact-checking website, you can see maybe where some of their, or not even a fact-checking website, if you're using a website and you want to know how well they do with when it comes to fact-checking and verifying their info, it aligns with their media bias chart as well. And you can see their breakdown of the different media bias ratings and why they would list certain organizations in certain areas. So it's really helpful, especially if you're not really familiar with a lot of these organizations. And remember, I said, as a fact checker, you do have to kind of have your own, you know, toolkit of websites and organizations that you can depend on to be reporting on an issue that is important to you. And so when you encounter info, rather than reading from the original source, you might want to go and read laterally. And so reading laterally is difficult to do when you don't have that, you know, toolkit of different media outlets that you can depend on. So that media bias chart and just these media bias tools are going to be a great option when it comes to investigating your sources, right? Another thing that I want to point out when it comes to investigating a source, sometimes you might have organizations like this one. So we're going to do a little investigating here. I hope you guys are ready. So this organization is called Foundation for a Smoke-Free World. They are allegedly here, you know, global, they're providing tobacco around the world statistics that have been updated as of July 1st, 2022. So they're fairly consistent. The profiles included the latest data available regarding key trends in tobacco use, disease burden, and the regulatory environment, and efforts to diversify the agricultural sector away from tobacco. So the profile provides an overview of the countries with highest tobacco use and its consequences on health and economic well-being of its citizens. I would like for us collectively, if you can on your own, go to look up Foundation for a Smoke-Free World and maybe use the Wikipedia trick, because I don't believe that they are a part of our media bias chart. So I'm going to give it like 2 or 3 minutes, actually just 2 minutes. It shouldn't take that long. Foundation for a Smoke-Free World. And you let me know, based on our Just Add Wikipedia trick, what do you find about this organization that apparently seems to be an organization that wants to, you know, spread awareness about the consequences, you know, health and economic consequences of tobacco use? And our participants, you feel free to get on the mic or use the chat, however you want to engage today. You feel free to use that method. Okay, so I'm going to demonstrate it here for the purpose of our recording, and I'm going to go ahead and look up. Oh, look at that. It's already predicting what I want. Foundation for a Smoke-Free World, Wikipedia. Foundation for a Smoke-Free World is an organization focused on smoking harm reduction, founded in 2017. It is funded by Philip Morris International, which had initial plans for 80 million in annual funding. So who is Philip Morris International? I'm gonna click on that. Philip Morris International Inc. is an American multinational tobacco company with products sold in over 180 countries. The most recognized and best-selling products of this country are Marlboro. Philip Morris International is often referred to as one of the companies comprising big tobacco. What is the area of conflict here? What would be the issue? So you have the Foundation for a Smoke-Free World, which is funded by Philip Morris International, aka Big Tobacco. Why? What's the disconnect here? I'm not even gonna ask why, because then we would have to go into a lot more, Scooby-Doo type of investigation to figure out why are you doing this? I just want to know what is our response to that? Like, am I going to believe everything that is published on this website? Considering the Foundation for a Smoke-Free World is receiving most of its funding and money. Oh, they're playing both sides. Maybe. And maybe Philip Morris might get like a tax break or some type of, incentive for funding, anti-tobacco research. Like Edwin said, they're playing both sides. There has to be some incentive why an organization that makes a lot of money from tobacco would be funding research that is clearly showing the negative health effects of using tobacco. So we get some very interesting results when we do a little bit of digging and we essentially investigate the sources of information. So going back to our initial slide, when we are investigating the source, you want to know the agenda, not just the expertise, but the agenda of the person who created the source, because it's crucial to how we would interpret the information. So we have here, according to Wikipedia, the foundation spent more money on public relations than on scientific research. Thank you so much, Terry, because that is a really interesting fact that you would have, these organizations that realistically only want to make themselves look good, right? They want to kind of maintain this public relation instead of actually going in and doing scientific research that would essentially show that their product is not very good. So yeah, Wikipedia for the win. I am always going to advocate for Wikipedia as much as a lot of professors don't like it, which is understandable. Alrighty, so I don't see any questions in the chat regarding the move number 2. So we're going to go on to number 3. Finding better coverage. So once again, sometimes we might encounter information and we might say, okay, well, I know that this is coming from a biased source of sorts, or maybe I'm not familiar with the source. Maybe you did investigate the source, and you're like, Wikipedia doesn't have anything on this org or this person. If it's an individual, there's a lot missing here. The next thing that you can probably do is find better coverage. So what does it mean? So when you want to verify what you're looking at, you want to go ahead and go to your trusted resources, i.e. that media bias chart that we posted. Maybe look at some of those centered organizations and see if they have published any information on the claim that you are looking at. The reason that fact checkers have a wide variety of sources that they trust is because these sources go through a lot of effort to verify what they're publishing before they publish it, right? So these are people that do a lot of the legwork for you. As a fact checker, you don't have to be a world-renowned detective. You simply have to have a repertoire of tools that you can rely on to read laterally to go ahead and substantiate. So as you're finding better coverage, we're still still going back to reading laterally. We're reading across different areas of the internet to kind of come to our own conclusion about what is the actual truth of the matter. Now, there are some fact-checking websites that I personally trust. Snopes is pretty familiar. Factcheck.org is probably familiar with some people from high school, but Pointer is a great option as well. So I will go ahead and open these and put the links for these inside of our chat within Zoom. So you all have access to some of these wonderful resources that are going to help you when it comes to fact checking. I really like these organizations. So this one here is Snopes. And you can search Snopes, or look at some of the things that they are posting here. You can look at factcheck.org, which is another one. This one is one in which you can search for what you're looking for as well. So if there's a particular thing that you're looking for to fact check, you can come into these organizations and look at that. And then last one would be Pointer. And I like Pointer because they clearly identify what is an opinion, because they do have people that post opinions. So they're very clear about what is an opinion versus what is a verified publication that can be substantiated. So Pointer is a great option as well when it comes to fact checking information. So they do have a lot of fact checking. They even have a teen fact checking network. And then they are also a part of PolitiFact, which is another one that a lot of people depend on when it comes to national and local elections as well, to kind of verify what a lot of the candidates are saying. They track a lot of what the candidates say, and then they fact check them, basically. So PolitiFact is a great place to go to as we are coming up on our election cycles. So these are some areas where you can find better coverage. Now, another strategy that you can utilize to find better coverage is Google News, right? So Google News is a great option because you can essentially open up a Google search, type in the keywords for what you're looking for, and then hit the news tab on Google, which we're going to demonstrate. And you can kind of scan the results to see if other people are reporting on this. And remember, with our all sides media bias chart, we can kind of look and see what media outlets are reporting on a particular fact, right? You can also add the terms fact check to the end of your search. So just like how we added Wikipedia to the end of our search, we can add fact check. And that will also produce some useful search results from fact checking outlets if they are reporting on that issue. So here's an example tweet / Facebook post. And this is one in which you would utilize this, right? So it says here, when you go to Walmart and they have the wipes to clean your cart handle, how many of you don't use them? Was told today that the police chief also suggests you do it also because of all the problems with drugs nowadays. And if they have fentanyl or something like that still on their hands and they touch that cart handle and then you do, it can get into your system. Scary, but worth taking the time to clean the handle. All you'd have to do is rub your nose or touch your child's mouth. Very long post in general, but these are the kinds of things that we see on Facebook, right? No links here at all. We don't know what police chief they're talking about. We actually don't even know which Walmart they're at. There's a lot in here that is just completely unsubstantiated, but these are the types of things that we would see on a regular basis. So my strategy here would probably be to Google search, fentanyl on shopping carts, because I want to see who is reporting on this, especially if it's odd that the police chief would say this in passing to someone and not actually report on this so that it's a public safety issue, right? So I'm going to look up fentanyl on shopping carts. And maybe I want to do my news here. So I'm going to click on news and I want to see. So we have, is fentanyl on shopping carts really a problem, from Forbes? I'm not really familiar with Forbes. Maybe my all sides chart will have something on Forbes. Let me see if I can pull that up. So according to All Sides, Forbes is centered. Okay, so Forbes might not be bad. If I click on Forbes, they tell me it's like right a little bit left of center, has low or initial confidence in bias rating. Okay. And so they give you a little bit of information about what Forbes is, what does center mean in terms, and then, you know, other bits of information regarding like Forbes's rating, right? So a lot of people are saying it's kind of a little bit left of center, left leaning type of information. So I might be able to trust Forbes in terms of figuring out if there is actually a problem in our communities when it comes to fentanyl and shopping cart. But then I also see something here, fact check. Can you overdose from fentanyl on shopping cart handles, right? Shopping cart, is that true? So I would probably go with WSVN because they're fact checking this. And then I would probably go with Forbes because they're actually going to answer the question. This does not confirm or deny if the fentanyl is a problem, right? We haven't clicked on either one of those, but this does give me confidence that there is reporting overall on the issue. And then I can probably go in and read more about it, right? So this is the quote that I took it from here. It was deleted from the Facebook, right? And it says here, the post about the fentanyl was sent to me from another officer at another department. I simply shared it. What is the problem with that? The post was sent, so this is the post we read, and the person deleted it. And then they're saying the post was sent to me by someone else, and I simply shared it. If you were here at the beginning, one of the main things we talked about is if you cannot verify the information yourself, the first step in our SIFT moves is to stop. Stop, don't share anything that you cannot corroborate. So this embarrassment of them having to delete their Facebook post could have been avoided altogether. And this misinformation could have been avoided if they simply stopped and did not share that information that they could not verify. So you can go ahead and read the rest of this, in which they kind of, you know, detail what is going on, you know, regarding the fentanyl on the shopping carts. And then they have a couple of links and other bits of information. But that is how I would go about that. And I like that Forbes actually published the original Facebook post as well, because now we know where that unsubstantiated claim was being spread to. And you can even go with WSVN and their fact checking, you know, about what's going on and, you know, all that other good stuff. They do have a link to Snopes, which is one of the fact checking websites that we looked at. And then you can kind of see here that Snopes is rating that information as false. So that's another quick way to verify this information, which I really love about fact checking, is that we have so many tools, thanks to the internet, to help us verify information. So I'm going to close this out. And so we looked at, you know, Google News strategy in conjunction with fact checking, and you can see how those two things would work together. Now, ooh, did I skip one? No, I didn't. Oh my goodness. Okay, we are ahead of schedule. I was like, did I skip something? No, okay. So we looked at, let's see here. We stopped initially, we investigated the source, and we looked at how you can use Wikipedia and also All Sides to investigate the agenda of a source. We were able to find better coverage by using Google News search as a strategy and reading laterally, as well as using fact-checking websites to figure out, you know, whether or not we can trust that information. And then now the fourth move is tracing the claim or media to its original context. A lot of the times this is the most tedious one, so I would recommend you save this for something if you want to prove a point. I know a lot of people have these, you know, family game nights, especially when it comes to like Scrabble or other fun games in your family, and there's always like an argument over who is correct about something. This is where your investigative skills of tracing a claim can come in handy, especially when it comes to interacting with, you know, people in our personal lives, right? So if you're tracing a claim, a lot of what we do find in the media or on the internet has been taken out of context. A lot of that info is not actually from the original source. It would be amazing if that was something that was required, but it may not always be the case. You may not encounter info in its original context, right? So when you're tracing a claim, you are basically going back to the original source so that you can accurately judge for yourself whether or not the information is worthy of your attention. Remember, as a fact checker, that is what, you know, we are building towards. We are building towards our ability to kind of find the original context, right? So one strategy that I utilize is called click-through. So clicking through, I know a lot of people, when you go to a website, like what we did earlier with WSVN, and you see those links that are in the website itself, a lot of people just assume that because there is a link there, that that link must lead to a reputable source, right? We read something and we see a bunch of links, and rather than actually clicking on the link, we just go ahead and assume, well, this person must know what they're talking about, or else they wouldn't hyperlink all that stuff. You'd be surprised by how many organizations are hyperlinking information that only leads you to another page within their organization, which is what I call self-citing. I'm citing myself, which does not really bode well in terms of your credibility, because if I'm trying to make a claim, why is it that the only source to corroborate that claim is me? That's a little bit odd. So one example that we have here is our good friend John Doe. And this person is saying, I've said it before and we'll say it again, school kills creativity. Looks like NASA agrees with me according to this research. Okay, so we are going to do a very quick click through. We're not even actually going to read anything. Mind you, as we're sifting our information, we're not taking the time to read every line, every detail of the source. We're actually just doing a lot of skimming to decide, once again, whether or not it is worthy of reading. Do I even want to waste my time on this, right? So we're going to look at this tweet here, and the tweet goes to Curious Mind magazine. So I'm going to open up the tweet. Here's our tweet. And remember, the claim is that NASA agrees that school kills creativity. NASA is agreeing that schools are killing the creativity of children. So Curious Minds magazine, outright, I am not familiar with this organization. I don't know Curious Mind magazine. I could, you know, take the time and go to all sides and maybe search them up and see where that is. But once again, we are just doing the click-through method, right? So we're just tracing at this point. We're not even going to bother with this, because as a fact checker, I'm just going to ignore this organization because I don't know them. Now, they are essentially reporting on some information that, you know, we're systematically dumbed down, and our education system is one of the first places to blame for our dumbing down. And so they're citing this person, Dr. George Land, a famous speaker, consultant, and general systems scientist, who is making the connection between creativity and our, you know, education programs. And then they do link to this 1968, he conducted a longitudinal study for 1,600 children, right? I'm gonna do a Control F, and I'm gonna try to find where it says NASA. Okay, here it is. It was exactly the same test that Dr. Land and Bet Jarman created for NASA to measure the creative potential and problem-solving capacity of their future rocket scientists. So essentially, this study was allegedly created for NASA. But I don't see anywhere in here where it's saying NASA agrees that schooling dumbs us down or reduces our creativity. So I'm going to click on this link because we're using click-through. So I'm going to do a lot of clicking. And the next thing I'm noticing is it brings me to a PDF, which I'm already highly suspicious of. I don't like this. So it's bringing me to this PDF here, which has clearly been scanned in, looks fairly old. And I'm going to once again do Control F, and I want to find out where they mention NASA. So NASA is only mentioned one time. And is this study published by George Land? Is this written by George Land? No, this is written by Larry Vint. So I'm very confused because all of this seems very misleading, even though I am seeing somewhere about NASA This was the same test used by NASA to select innovative engineers and scientists. And it's giving you some of the results of the test here. But once again, I'm not concerned about any of this. I'm concerned about the claim. It says here, school kills creativity, and it looks like NASA agrees with me. Where in any of the clicking that we did does this say NASA agrees that schooling kills creativity? I didn't see any of that. So mind you, I have my blinders on. I'm not getting distracted by any of the other things. I'm simply focused on what this person is saying. School kills creativity and NASA agrees with me. I don't see anything in here about NASA's corroboration. I don't even see where NASA published the study that George Land did. This person is reporting on the study, but I would have to go find the actual study, which is already highly suspicious. So this is information that I will simply ignore. I saw a tweet. The tweet seems unsubstantiated. I'm going to go about my day ignoring this information, not even going to argue with this person, not even going to share this information, just going to leave it alone because it's not substantiated. There's nothing I can do about that. Another one that you might want to consider is this one here, which I love this tweet here. So it's an expensive lunch. Rat dies after gorging on cash while stuck in an ATM, right? This just seems a little sensational, right? So in my mind, if we were to look at some of our SIFT moves, based on our understanding, we have the stop, we have find better coverage, we have tracing the claim. Let me go back to the beginning here. Yes, so stop, finding better coverage, tracing the claim, and investigating the source, right? Which one of these moves do we want to engage with when it comes to this story about the rat dying after eating all this money in the ATM? We probably already stopped because we're like, this is weird. Do we want to investigate the source from mandatory.com? Do we want to find better coverage of this? Or do we want to trace it back to the original report? And remember, there's no right or wrong answer. Okay, we could investigate the source, mandatory.com. So my investigation would be one of two things. Mandatory Wikipedia, but I might not find anything. I'm not sure. They are a lifestyle website based in LA, owned by media company Evolved, focuses its content on male lifestyle audience. Doesn't really seem like a very serious reporting organization. Maybe I can look them up on All Sides. Search for them. Mandatory. No, they're not really showing up. So I already know based on those two things there that this is probably not the best source. So my next move would be one of the two. I can either try to trace this claim or I can find better coverage of this. I think in this instance, maybe I just find better coverage because if there's a lot of other people also reporting on this, one of them has to be from a reputable source, right? So ATM rat, maybe I want to go to news. And then I can see here, we have CNBC is talking about it. USA Today is talking about it. CBS News is talking about it. The New York Post, BBC, which I love BBC as a reputable fact check source, is talking about it, as well as The Guardian. We have quite a few different news outlets, not just mandatory, that are talking about this random rodent that got stuck in an ATM and ate roughly what, between $17,000 to $18,000 in the ATM, right? So already just by doing a quick two-step, I looked at mandatory.com. I'm not familiar with them. So I said, all right, I don't really know who they are, but maybe I can read laterally by doing a Google News search. I could also trace the image itself, right? So one of the great things about the age of technology that we live in is that as I'm tracing the claim to the original context, I can also trace images, right? So I can trace images and memes by using a reverse image search on Google. And this comes in handy, particularly when I'm trying to figure out where did they get this image from? Because once again, a lot of things on the internet are posted out of context. They might be photoshopped, they might be just, like a screen grab that only has like half the page and is missing the other half of the page. There's a lot of different ways in which images are altered on the internet, right? So I can definitely do a reverse image search on Google and I can maybe find out where this came from. So I'm going to go back to that tweet. Where are you? One second, let me pull up my tweet. Here it is, expensive lunch. Okay, so I can go back to mandatory.com maybe, and to reverse image search this, which is another way I can do that, would be to maybe look at this image here. Maybe I can go to the actual tweet here. Either way, I can right click and I can search image with Google and see if something comes up. You can see that it pops up over here to the right and there's no results for this image. So I'm not really sure where they got this image from to put as the placeholder on that tweet. So same thing here. If I were to reverse search this one, search image with Google, this doesn't seem to be the image as well, right? That's a little suspicious. Now, what if I were to go to maybe one of these other tweets that they are utilizing? Maybe I can go with this one here. So I'm just going right clicking and I'm search image with Google. And once I select that, let me try to pull this out some more. And it's going to search the internet to try to find this image. So we have some luck here. We have a couple of different sources: India Times, Outlook India, Daily Star, News on 6, Twitter, News Mobile. So there's a lot of media outlets, One India, that are from India, and this did take place in India, that I can definitely be certain that this did occur because there's quite a few news outlets that are publishing that same image from the tweet, right? So that is another way that you can maybe, corroborate and verify images in particular to ensure that they're not taken out of context or photoshopped. Another great option that you can use is find image source. So see web pages that include this image, and that will also pull up, some websites that would have this particular image. And you can see USA Today is one of those that includes that image as well. So you can use Google image search to find info. Another one that I would want to point out is this one right here. So I have this image of a powerful protester spelling out love with burning homes and businesses, which I feel like would have been a bigger story had that been the case, right? I can use my moves. I can definitely look up the Babylon Bee and verify that this is a satire news outlet. It is not a real news outlet at all. They do even on their website let you know that they are satire. I could use, the other moves and probably try to, find better coverage of this claim, right? So, but I'm actually just going to look at this image because I'm curious to know, where did they find this image? Did this image actually occur? Imagine if you got this as a text message and the only thing you see in the text is this image and your friend is like, oh my goodness, someone, some people burned the word love, using all these buildings and homes, in Minneapolis, right? You can do this on your mobile phone as well by searching the image with Google. You would have to download the Google Lens app on your mobile phone, and you can upload that image. And you can essentially see, if I go to find image source, because I want to know the source of this, I can see here that there are no other news outlets whatsoever. Everything else is just tweets. So you have a bunch of people retweeting this that did not substantiate that this happened. Someone used it as their SoundCloud album cover, but there are no news outlets, no reputable news outlets that we can say that this image is also featured in. So that is a really quick way for me to go ahead and, you know, corroborate, essentially look at information and say, well, this doesn't really work. I'm not really going to pay attention to this one, right? And then I'm going to do one last demonstration of how you can utilize SIFT when it comes to the internet. So we have our good friend, John Doe, which we've been working with for ATM rats and some other stuff. And it says here, it might be time to ditch sunscreen. The post is from moms.com. It's claiming that FDA warns that chemicals from the sunscreen are going to enter your bloodstream. So if I'm quickly looking at this info, what do I know about moms.com? Probably not a single thing, because I've never seen any news or media from this outlet, moms.com, right? So I don't know anything about moms.com. I just want to know, is this true, right? I'm just fact checking at this point. So one of the moves that I would utilize would be my click through, because they would have to at least put where they got the source from, right? They would have to put somewhere in here. So if I'm clicking through this link here, and mind you, I'm not even reading it. I'm just trying to find where they got it. They link somewhere, they put something that doesn't link anywhere. So they mentioned the study that was published in JAMA. And if I click this link, you can see it does not lead me to JAMA. This leads me to CNN Health. So that is also problematic, because you're mentioning the study that essentially, you know, you're getting all this information from, but when I click on that link, it doesn't lead me anywhere. It leads me to someone else's reporting on this matter. CNN is a pretty good resource. It's a pretty good source in general, but my problem is that as I'm clicking through, you're not showing me where you actually found the info. So that's problematic already. And then if I'm looking at CNN, maybe they can give me some click through here, or I might have to go and look up the study myself. So they have the study here, and then now I can see the original study itself, in which maybe I can look at their findings, right? And if you look at the findings here, it says here, the systemic absorption of sunscreen's active ingredients supports the need for further studies to determine the clinical significance of this finding. This tells me that they did not come to that conclusion. They said that, yes, maybe, you know, based on the application, that there are some of the sunscreen chemicals that are absorbed into the bloodstream, but the absorption and the ingredients need further study to determine the clinical significance of these findings. This does not tell me that, you know, that sunscreen is harmful and it's going to get into my bloodstream and it's toxic and I should stop using sunscreen. This simply tells me that they conducted a study and they came to the conclusion that they need to do more research to figure out the clinical significance of whether or not sunscreen is toxic or harmful to our bloodstream. That's it. So based on this person is saying, I need to ditch my sunscreen. This person didn't even actually report on it. They're just kind of regurgitating whatever CNN said. And CNN actually is the only news outlet that is going to go ahead and break it down and tell me about the FDA study that led to the JAMA study that would then, you know, lead to the conclusion that there needs to be more research, right? So as they're also corroborating that research is urgently needed, and that the study itself is not necessarily conclusive. So you can see how so much of the internet and so much of what we encounter on the internet is usually taken out of context. and sliced up and maybe regurgitated to us in a way that is not necessarily the full story. And as a fact checker using the SIFT moves, it is your duty to then go ahead and utilize some of the moves that we've discussed today to see if you can essentially either trace it back to the original source, maybe read laterally and find better coverage, find other places that are reporting on the issue. Or you might want to go ahead and, verify the credibility of that organization that's publishing it. So I could have done any of those things. I chose to do click through because that's just what I wanted to do at the moment. But there is not necessarily a right or wrong to how you fact check. The idea behind the SIFT moves is that you utilize one move. If you hit a wall or you come to something that's inconclusive, you go ahead and use the other moves until you can verify for yourself whether or not the information you're looking at is factual and worthy of your time. So that is the end of our presentation today. I would like to encourage you all to jot down my email if you would like to follow up with any questions. If you would like to learn more about these types of research strategies such as SIFT, or ACT UP or CRAP, which are, alternative ways to verify and evaluate information, you are more than welcome to enroll in LIS 2004, which is a course that is being taught at all campuses as well as online through MDC. LIS 2004 is an introduction to online research course, and they do allow you to go more in depth with some of these strategies to learn more about how you can accurately evaluate information. So thank you so much.